Airbnb has become such a hot topic in recent years. So today I invited George Salas on the show with me. George is an investor and an educator. From April 2018 to now, he grew his Airbnb portfolio from 0 to 45 units and still growing. If you are into growing your Airbnb portfolio, this episode is for you. Hey ballers, welcome to episode 103. In this episode, we're going to talk about what the heck is Airbnb. With me is George Salas from Houston, Texas. Hey George, welcome to the show.
Hello, V, the Queen V. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for asking. It's an honor to have you here. I've been hearing your name a lot lately. So tell me what you are working on today.
Well, today, actually, I'm in self-quarantine. My brother got exposed to COVID, so I am being a good citizen and self-quarantining until I get my test results. And I'm actually working on recording the last modules of our newest course, which is VSTR formula for short-term rental operators who want to build a business with virtual assistant. So I'm just finishing that up, and I'm enjoying the day. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know George is really big into educating people. So George, can you maybe give the audience a little bit of your background, what you did before Airbnb and real estate and, what you do now?
Sure, I'll give you a two minute breakdown of everything, right? My journey really started when I was 6 years old, and I was living in Peru, and that's where I'm from, and sitting one day in the living room with my parents, and they simply said, hey, we're gonna move to the city. My mom was getting a divorce, and we moved to a very small city called Tarapoto in Peru, which it was an adobe house. So I lived in an adobe house for 9 years, and half of the house melted. So it was a little town of 60,000 people, and then my dad got back into my life, and we were able to move here. So like I actually left my town when I was 15 years old, so 20 years ago, and I made it here with the dream, right, the American dream of building my own business. And I went through school and went through a lot of struggles, right? So I was a nightclub promoter for about 10 years, and I met hundreds of thousands of people. Well, maybe not hundreds of thousands, I would say tens of thousands here in Houston. And I did events of all kinds. I did over 2,000 events, and as big as 3,000 people per event. So then one day, I decided to invest in a nightclub, and I had saved from promoting, over 400 grand, and I decided to invest in a nightclub. And to be honest with you, I invested in a partner with this nightclub, and because I didn't know businesses I know now, and I didn't know real estate, the operations of that business, decided to just not decided but dropped completely, and we lost everything. Since I was
That's
the
one of the
marketer and
hardest
promoter,
business, George, the
yeah, it
nightclub.
was crazy. So
Yeah.
never again. Now I know real estate, right? So then I built out, and I decided to get into real estate one day, and it was like I had to do it. I had to change my life. So since then, I've been able to do over 70 deals in the last 2.5 years. Wholesale deals, 25 plus, fix and flips. I've done a couple owner finance. I've also done subject twos, and I've done a lot of arbitrage leases, and I've converted a lot of my sub two purchases and fix and flips into my Airbnb. So currently, I have 45 short-term rental properties, and this is between the ones I own, which is six, about 6 or 7 management properties, 25 or 28 arbitrage, and so it's about 45 plus. So it's been a long journey. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for sharing. That's a very inspiring story. Um, so obviously you are here today to talk about Airbnb. So maybe
Absolutely.
briefly, I know it can go long and it can go short. Maybe just briefly explain to the audience what the heck is Airbnb?
Well, Airbnb is simply a platform that acts as a third-party booking site so that travelers or anyone that just wants to stay anywhere can book using this third-party platform, and they're able to get, you know, anywhere from any type of properties, houses to, apartments, condos, even rooms in hotels for cheaper. And then the quality is higher, meaning you get more for the money that you pay, right? But then you also get a bigger, bigger quality property as far as all the terms, like, you're getting more space, you're getting more amenities, and where you're paying less than a hotel. So it's a lodging platform that has grown to even go public this week, and it's been the stomping point for many real estate investors and, many hosts that wanted to start their entrepreneur career through hosting on Airbnb, including, a lot of us here in Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm.
So that's crazy. They started out as what the guy just wanted to share his apartment, right? And then here they are. And it's kind of funny. This show is pre-recorded, but today is actually the day that Airbnb finally goes public.
Yep, it sure is.
And
12 years later.
Yeah, and they did try earlier this year, but then they had setback due to the pandemics. So congratulations to Airbnb. So George, do you want to maybe go into share any thought that you have about Airbnb going public?
I think it's time for them. And on the host side, I think they took a big step down from the host community, the investor community, when they made those moves in March. But they made up for those bad decisions that they made, and I'm going to leave it at that. As of right now, I mean, it is the platform for all of us to bring in the max amount of revenue we can in our property. So I got to give that to them, and Brian Chesky worked his butt off to be able to get it to this point, right? So I think they're doing great, and I'm very surprised they actually, are releasing the IPO this year with the pandemic and all right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts.
So maybe we can later on we can probably cover, going IPO, but what that means for the host. Maybe we can go over that down the line a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start using the term short-term rentals, because short-term rentals have been around for years, way before Airbnb existed. But nobody knew anything about short-term rental until Airbnb made it, and now they created kind of their own term, Airbnb. Most people refer to it as Airbnb, right?
Yeah,
most people
that's
know.
the standard now. It's the Apple of short-term rentals.
It's like Kleenex. Right?
Pretty much. Kleenex, Kodak, Apple.
Right.
My iPhone.
So maybe take us back to how you started your first one.
So go back to 2018 and think of a real estate investor doing everything in their business, running around, doing 5 fix and flips, learning what wholesaling is. So April of 2018 when I learned about Airbnb. So less than 2.5 years ago, right at 2.5 years ago. And while I was in the nightclub promoting on a Saturday night, a friend told me that she was making $1,000 a month from renting her apartment. And then her rent was $1,200 with all bills paid, and she was bringing in anywhere between $2,000 and $2,500. And I was like, wow, that's insane. So I looked into it, and I ended up doing tons of research, watching every single video and reading everything I could. And I went for it. I decided to, without knowing a freaking darn thing, and just very little. Obviously, I had about a month, 2 months worth of training and kind of making my notes and drawing a map, you know, and then the great thing of it was, as an entrepreneur, you start without sometimes knowing how you're going to get there. But if you start with that vision, then you draw the map to get there as you get there, as you go, right? So sometimes it could be like an up and down for any entrepreneur, but their journey there is going to be so different, but the end is always the same. So the end for me was to impact hundreds of lives and thousands of lives by actually starting a business that I could go into that was niche inside the real estate space, to where I could pick something that was more niche than just wholesaling, which I had picked originally, and in being able to teach it and impact other people so they can better their lives. You know, so that was my whole vision, and that's how I got started. This is April of 18, and I started with 8 apartments. Okay, right in downtown.
So you didn't go with one. You went in and said, you know what? I got these 8 apartment units. I'm just gonna make them all Airbnb.
Okay, well, I lied.
Walk us through that thought process there. That very, you know, scary first moment, right?
My thought process was, I'm gonna master this, and I'm gonna go all the way in. Okay, so what I did is I grabbed the money that I made wholesaling that July, which was $62,000 wholesaling, my best wholesaling month I've ever had, you know, wholesale for like a year and a half. And I took that money and I started investing. So I got 2 apartments first in the Montrose area in July. And then I got 8 more the following week or 2 weeks. But those didn't get ready and didn't get launched until the beginning of August. So I had July 20th was my first launch, right? And then August 1st of 2018 was when I first got 1 penny of Airbnb. And since that point, I knew that one day I would be right here with you and making an impact and teaching other people how to do this, and so they can better their lives, right? So I started with the end in mind. That was it.
How long did it only took you, what, 2 months from the time you learned about it until you got your first one going?
I learned about it in April of 2018. And so take April, May, June, July, 3.5 months. Yeah.
So you must be an action-oriented person.
I'm a massive action type of guy. And the same amount of time it took me from learning real estate to doing my first deal, 4 months.
Yeah, because you can sit and analyze all day, but if you don't take action, you'll never get it going. And look at you. And how many are you at right now?
Over 45. I honestly lost count because we just added 4 more like this week. The 3 of them are management clients that wanted us to set them up for them. And since I've got a full team, we're doing it for them and we're going to manage them. And then 1 is arbitrage, an arbitrage apartment.
Okay. So you mentioned the term arbitrage a few times. Maybe can you just explain that to the audience a little bit for those who don't really know what that means?
Absolutely. Arbitrage is essentially a margin, right? So when you say the term, I'm going to arbitrage this property, it's referring to rental arbitrage. And rental arbitrage is the difference between how much you get in rent from Airbnb, gross, minus the rent that you're paying to your landlord, and minus the expenses to operate. That margin is your profit, and that margin is your arbitrage. So when you say I'm doing arbitrage, it's properties I'm renting, right? So there's 3 models, and essentially in Airbnb, for you to be able to be part of the Airbnb or short-term rental community, you have to pick 3. The one which takes no money is where you manage properties for other people, which is called co-hosting. The one that takes a decent amount of money is arbitrage, because you've got to pay for the furniture. There's many ways to partner with people, right? But essentially if it's your business, you've got to put the money up to pay for the furniture. And then you buy, which is the normal process for most real estate investors.
Okay. So is it like renting, signing a long-term lease with the landlord, the owner, and then you sublease them out short-term?
You sign a 2, 3 year, 4 year lease. The longer the better, and then you put it on the Airbnb short-term rental market. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So how would you go about identifying like which one would be an an ideal property for Airbnb?
I've actually developed my own process, which I will be sharing on my next online course. And this acquisitions process takes me through a reverse engineered strategy where I first do the research on the most profitable sweet spots, and then I find the best performing property types in those sweet spots so that I'm actually going for winning properties every single time. And no, I didn't do this on my first 20 deals, like at all, because I knew that they were downtown. I wanted to build it and I was eager to get there. And I knew we were going to make great money, because my first 10 were two mantras, 8 right in front of the Toyota Center. They were older C-class units, but I was like, man, this is a great location. So it was when you have a process to be able to analyze these properties, and then what your numbers are, then you have a much higher chance of being successful in whatever it is that you're doing, especially real estate.
Would you share with the audience? I'm sure you didn't come up with that process overnight. Can you briefly maybe go over the top few things, top 3 important items for someone who, you know, they want to get in and they're looking at properties? What are the things that they need to know or to look for
Mm-hmm.
before they, say this is what I want to do?
Okay. So, I mean, I would say number one, step one would be seeing how much cash you have available, right? If you have $5,000, then you can start with one bedroom apartment arbitrage, just to give you an example. And depending on the cash that you have available, that will direct the strategy you need to take, right? And then after you decide it, you simply need to figure out through a tool called AirDNA. And I don't make money off these guys. That's just what I use, and it makes our lives easier. But then when you get to AirDNA, you have to figure out where to find those sweet spots, and in the process that of finding the sweet spots with the better performing properties, that is something that couldn't be explained in the next hour, or two. It would take long to get you through those steps, and then that's what I've been able to develop to where, oh my god, this is available, the resource. Why didn't I do that from the beginning? Or why don't people do that? And it's because this whole Airbnb game for hosts is barely new, right? So people are doing it, they're teaching it, and they're being very successful, but it is still new. So that's another tip. And then third, know your numbers.
What are the numbers they should know?
You should definitely know what your gross. That's a great question. Definitely your gross income, your occupancy percentage, and then your ADR, average daily rate. Okay? Gross income, your occupancy percentage, and your average daily rates. Those are the 3 most important metrics you need to know. So then you can subtract everything else. Everything else could be done on paper. You could do it right here. You could do it whenever, right? But if you don't know those, then you won't be able to figure out what properties are doing what numbers.
So when you say the occupancy rate, for investor who get these, when you do the rental arbitrage or getting the home and you deciding whether you're gonna rent it out long term or short term. How do you find out the occupancy rate? This episode is brought to you by Buzz Vacation Rentals, a premier property management company in Houston and Galveston area. Give Buzz a call at 281-549-8432 to learn more about their rent guarantee program, or check out their website at listwithbuzz.com. Now, back to the Real Estate Baller Show.
So you go into AirDNA to figure out the occupancy rate, and then AirDNA will give you an average of the occupancy rate for that zip code. It's fairly easy. Now, you need to know these things before you go running into AirDNA and believe that that's possible. Know that that occupancy rate is an average of all the properties, right, for that zip code. And then when you go in there, there are other factors that are going to increase or decrease your occupancy rate. Okay. A factor could be how you stage a property. So just because someone shows that they're 70, 80% or 60 on AirDNA doesn't mean you're going to get 60, right? If you don't stage it properly and you don't take the time to make this property look desirable, then that's one factor that's out of the window, right? If you don't list it properly with beautiful pictures, very precise amenity-oriented title, and then a great description, that's another factor that goes out the window. So now your chances of getting that 70, 80, 100, 90%, they go out the window, right? So you've got to consider that there are more factors on that. So if you take a good average, AirDNA will give you a great average, but that's it. That's all it is, an average. You need to do a little bit more research and then see what a property that you're looking at makes in Airbnb. And you do that by just checking out other comps, right? And seeing how busy and how occupied they are, or analyzing these properties. There's several softwares, so I utilize AirDNA and I utilize market dashboards. So it is a price labs feature, and I know how to read it. I know how to analyze it, and they keep changing their interface. It just came out with it. So I like that feature because it gives me current data rather than an average, and it separates it by, property type, which is the same feature that AirDNA has, but simple difference is that that market dashboard will give you current data when AirDNA will give you past data from the last 12 months, right? So you have current, which is what you want, and you have past, which is long-term, right? So if you're thinking long-term, which you should always think long-term, then you do both. You do both strategies.
So maybe talk a little bit more about the in terms of risk, right? Because as an investor, we are at the end of the day, we want to minimize risk. I think for most people, the idea of doing Airbnb is risky. And so let's say I'm putting up a home for long term. I sign a 2-year lease or whatnot. I know that it's 100% occupied for the next 2 years. I know I'm getting an exact amount of rent every month. So for someone, to tell me that I need to do this short term, it sounds really risky, right?
It does.
I know you don't see that, and I personally don't see it that way. But for someone who is on the other side of the fence, looking over at this and saying, well, you're convincing me that now I'm going to have to furnish this home, which is going to cost me money. I have to put utility in it, put internet in it, cost me money, and I don't know what I'm going to get. So how do they minimize risk?
The way to minimize risk is, first of all, this goes for the risk takers. Just take action, right? That's the way to minimize risk, because there's risk in everything. For the non-risk takers, the way to minimize risk is to know your numbers. And the way to know your numbers is to understand the process. And to understand the process, you have to educate yourself, right? You have to learn and to analyze these properties. That's how you minimize risk if you are just getting started. Don't go and just do it. And I got very lucky, and I'm a very risk taker, right? But I wasn't going to let anything whatsoever stop me from being successful in this business, and I didn't. So I did every single task in my business when I got started, and now I do point half of one of the entire company. Not even one full task. So that would be my recommendation for everyone watching on risk.
So some of the questions I get asked a lot is hospitality. Is it 24/7?
Yes, it is. And what else? What else did they ask you? How do you do it?
Yeah. How do you manage it? I mean,
Well, essentially, everybody, right? There's two ways. You get a manager, a co-host, if you don't want to waste the time to learn. But if you are a real estate investor, go that route or learn it yourself and go through and learn, right? But get education. If you're not a real estate investor, also get some education, but you're going to learn by practice. Simple. Like you learn by practice, and then this is what you need to write down. This is probably the most important thing that I'm going to say through the entire here podcast. Write every single thing down when you are doing it, right? So if you're sending a message and they have a question, write the question down, write the response down, and put it onto a sheet. If they have another question, write the question down or copy and paste, put it into a sheet. That's called systems building, right? And when you do that, you're actually putting the systems that are in your head, which everyone already has, because I know how to answer to a guest, right? You know how to answer to a guest, but if you never write them down, how is someone else going to answer to a guest if you haven't taught them? So that means you're not building system if you're not writing things down. And if you are, you're building it. So from day one, your most important task is to write everything down. If you're a long-term person, if you're thinking this is going to be it, and this is the strategy that you're going to build and how you're going to build wealth and cash flow, and because there's great cash flow in this business. There's great cash flow, and I love it more than any other real estate strategy.
so talk to us maybe a little bit. Let's go back to preparing that home, right? To get it ready for Airbnb.
Absolutely.
What is it typically? Do you have to rehab the house? You know, what conditions does it have to be in? And what goes into furnishing? What do you have a certain price that you do for certain home as far as furnishing go?
Absolutely. And there are three levels that I actually stage and set up my properties at. Okay. There is that C class, or, low budget, medium, and then there's luxury. Okay. We are now doing luxury properties and medium, no longer C class. The C class was to launch, get started. So I have a lot of C class apartments, and they do okay. They do decent, especially now with the pandemic, right? And but you have to have three different levels of the types of amenities you're putting in there, appliances and linens and everything else. I mean, essentially, if you want to be in a budget and save as much money as you can, you could do that and then upgrade the property as you go, right? Excuse me. So, and if you had more money, then you could do it the right way. And now if it's a nice luxury property, you don't want to oversell it and put too many nice things in a B class property, in a B class neighborhood, but you want to just be right around with the type of property that you're setting up on listing.
So what does it normally cost? What's the range, maybe, if you can share with the audience, what it takes to probably are most of your inventory 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms, or 4 bedroom?
I would say about half half of them are one bedrooms, about 50%. So that's about 20, 22, 23. I have about 10 now, about 13 houses, and four 2 bedrooms. The house is anywhere between 3 and 7 bedrooms. Mm-hmm.
So it obviously costs more to furnish a bigger home than it is to a smaller home.
1,000%. Yeah, I would say an average of about $2,500 per room if you're doing like a 4 bedroom house. 2,500 per room, and then I would include if you have a game room, and that's maybe half of a room, and if you have a kitchen and a living, obviously every single property does. That's one room together, in my opinion. So 12,500 for a 4 bedroom property with labor. And if you do the labor, I would say you can save about $300 to $500. So which I did the labor for a lot of my properties, and I was staging them for a full 1 bedroom apartment with a full kitchen for about $4,000, maybe $4,500, and then that included the deposit and the rent, so which was $1,000 a piece. So $2,500 that includes the kitchen, and so you could do that math. So $5,000 if you want to do a nice, decently nice 1 bedroom, and if you want to do it more, obviously you're going to spend way more. If it's a luxury 1 bedroom, it's going to cost you a little bit more. I would add, medium, I would add a 15% premium and 25% to go luxury.
How long does it take to recoup the furniture money?
This investment, and if you're doing arbitrage, you can recoup. I've recouped it, as low as 6, 7, 8 months, depending on how that property is doing, right? So you can make, on a 1 bedroom, let me just give you an example. Like these downtown properties that I had, we're making 2,300 to 2,700 every month, and I made the money back in 7 or 8 months. Now I've got some houses that I just recently picked up, or restaged, and we added a little bit of money, and we recouped the money in 2 months, right? So like I took a property from doing like $3,500 and to about $4,000. And then I put $6,000 in extra amenities. We redid, added a bed, moved things around, added a TV in the game room, like a few nice things like art, right? And we did the pictures again and added a swing in the back. And now it's doing 7,500 to 8,000 when the max I ever got was like, 3,500, 4,000. So we've doubled it by making these smaller tweaks. So you could go either or. Mm-hmm.
Have you run into any of the HOA or restrictions issues?
Yes, right now I have, and that is a touchy subject. I would say just avoid HOAs and just look at their bylaws. And their bylaws, you're gonna have to argue it. Maybe if someone tells you if their bylaws say business, that business term Airbnb isn't considered a business, right? So you could argue that, but then it could cost you money because you're gonna have to fight it, right? So that's one point. But I would say to avoid HOAs. I don't like condos, so I avoid condos, and I deal mostly with apartment owners, right? And if you go through a property management, sometimes they have their strong rules, so you could do it, but they could change their rules anytime and then terminate your lease, for whatever reason, which has never happened to us, but it could. All right, so just be careful with the HOA.
What are the top 3 tips that you probably can give the audience?
Absolutely. If you're watching this, if you're whatever, live or replay, right? Number 1, start with the end in mind. Number 2, don't be scared to take action. If you want to be successful, you've got to take massive action. Number 3, know your numbers. Number 4, learn how to be productive and delegate. And number 5, bonus, get yourself a virtual assistant. Those are my top 5. I made it 5.
Those are really great tips. So, so we can't wrap this up if we don't talk about some of your horror stories.
Oh my goodness. I have some bad ones. N- Now I don't take care of them, so I'm not very aware of all the details. But one time I had a lady actually walk through flood my entire upstairs of the beautiful house that I was telling you about, which is in 77070. And I had to go fix the entire ceiling from the downstairs. They had a party and they flooded the master bathroom. I don't think I had to replace the carpet because we got to it on time. That's one horror. And then another one, oh my God, this one I'll never forget. I think there was about 100 people, maybe 150 people in a 1,500 square foot 2,000 square foot condo, 3 stories condo that I was renting. I was doing arbitrage, and when we went there, it was like a nightmare. We walked in there, and my team did. I went and saw it after. It was like, oh my goodness, there was just cocaine everywhere. There was Whataburger cups that I won't forget. The couches were ruined. The rugs were ruined. They took to try to steal a TV. Yeah, it was crazy. But the good part is Airbnb pays you for all this. You have to fight it, but they will pay you. And then there are other types of insurances, right? So you just got to be careful. No more
Speaking
horse.
of that, I'm sorry, George, I cut you off. What did you say?
I said I'm going to leave that as the horror stories because I'll keep going, you know.
Yeah, no, I know there's a lot of stories and I do have some of my own too. So speaking of that, we hear things about how to work with Airbnb, and you obviously have done a lot of uh, things with Airbnb. You have a lot of home listed on their site. So maybe give us some of the tips on how to work with them, because you said you had to deal with claims through them.
Right.
So, what are the things that maybe the audience should know about working with Airbnb?
Well, number one is there. There's a process for everything, right? And they don't give you the process for anything, and they make it as difficult as possible when it comes to claims. So I also developed a process for it, which we offer in our full coaching program. But essentially, the number one tip is every time you have an issue with Airbnb, you need to escalate the issue and then ask for the next available higher rep, right? That is the biggest tip when it comes to claims. And then also uh, escalate the issue to the supervisor, and then you can do a senior supervisor. When you get to talk to them, ask your questions. How do I solve this next time? What do I do if this happens? Or what do I do if that happens? How can I prevent this from happening again? They will tell you everything. And obviously not when you get to just a regular customer service person, but if you escalate it to a case manager, they know a little bit more. They're still reading out of a book, right? And a digital book. Then you got a supervisor, which supervisors are also going to be, reading out of a book. They know they've been there for a little bit longer. And when you get to a senior supervisor, that's someone that's been there for a long time and manages teams. So they know pretty much all the rules, but just escalate and don't give up. Don't give up.
Don't give up. That's right. Okay, so let's circle back to what we were talking about. Airbnb goes IPO. So maybe give us a little bit of your thought, your insight on how that would change us as the host, how it would affect us. Because I know from what I'm reading, it seems like the guests are benefiting from not having to pay the fees anymore.
Correct. So, I think right now it's not going to be more beneficial for the hosts, in my opinion. We're going to get the worst out of it, and Airbnb is trying to balance it. But because of the fees and many other reasons, Airbnb has to balance their relationship with guests and hosts. But ultimately, if there's always a new host, right? So they can work on another generation or another type of clientele for the hosts, because you need less of them, I would say. And then one host could have a certain amount of properties, and there's always going to be the next host available for them. But when you get a bad reputation with the guests, they can go somewhere else, right? So I don't know, to be honest, what they're thinking in when it comes to not really showing that love and appreciation that I would really think that they do, especially their management teams, so you have to fight. But again, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, seems like they had a little bit of a tough time during the pandemic because they had to cut back a lot of their operating costs and all of that. And it seems like that's gotten a little bit better now. So hopefully things will improve for both sides, the guest and the host, because they need both.
I agree.
Yeah. So in your role, and of course you have to stay competitive and you have to continuously learning and improving. How do you do that? What are the things that you do? What are your habits? What do you read? Who do you follow so that you can stay on top of the trend and things in your
Absolutely.
position?
I am a very, very big advocate of personal development. So my number one mentor is Darren Hardy. He has helped me in pretty much every area of my life, right? So anywhere from, and then everything else, we already know what to do in our Airbnb businesses and short-term rental management, right? It's the little things that we as people do and don't do that make the big difference. And those little things are our habits, right? And then our habits convert to how we act every single day. And each habit could lead you in a different direction. So I'm huge on mentorship. So I'm big with Darren Hardy, Brandon Bouchard, big on personal development, very spiritual as well. So, and then as far as business, I take several courses. I have a lot of online courses, maybe about 25, maybe 30. And I'm always watching an online course.
That's great.
Mhm.
What's your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby has always been playing soccer, right? And I haven't been able to play since I broke my knee. So right now, I just said it, right? My favorite hobby will be watching an online course or listening to a book and re-listening to it again and matching it with the paper book while I'm listening, highlighting. And I'm a nerd when it comes to that. And that drive has been so helpful over the past 2 years for my career, right? That drive has given me the opportunity to create larger goals, to create a coaching program and get my first online course out, right? So my hobby is to learn.
I think that's what get you to where you are today.
Thank you.
So how does the last question? How does the audience get in touch with you?
Absolutely. I have a social media site, okay? And the social media site is George Salas 360. So George Salas 360.com. And all my handles are there. And I'll be happy to connect and provide value. I've got a Airbnb Facebook group. And if you just go to the new real estate investor.com, thenewrealestateinvestor.com. That's where you'll find lots of tips, Airbnb people here in Houston, a large, nice community of people that want to learn and help each other out. And I'm always in that group posting valuable things, responding to people's questions and that sort of thing. So if you want value, is right there. And if you want to connect on social media, georgesalas360.com.
Well, thank you so much, George, for joining us. And that's about wrap it up today.
All right. Thank you for having me. Guys, let's do this. Don't give it up, and let's just keep up the great work and persistence for achieving our goals, Thank you for having me again.
It's great to have you. Thanks for sharing all of your knowledge and tips and tricks with us.
It's my pleasure.
Well, that's all for today's episode of Real Estate Ballers. Thanks for listening, and thank you, George, for joining me today. Don't forget to visit our website, REBallers.com, to learn more about us. Wherever you are listening to your podcast, please subscribe to the Real Estate Ballers so you'll never miss another show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'll appreciate a 5-star rating. Or if you simply tell a friend about us, that would help too. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.